Hi guys, welcome to Classic Rock and Country Music Facts and Trivia. Today's video is on some things that I know you don't know. If you know these things about Johnny Cash, you are the absolute epitome of knowledge of Johnny Cash. This stuff blew me away. Some of it you probably will know, but a lot of it you won't. But before we get started, I want to ask you to please subscribe. Please share these out. Appreciate it. Now, let's get to Johnny Cash. Where you at, man in black? He witnessed his brother's final moments. Johnny Cash's life was one of extremes from the very beginning. He was incredibly close with his older brother Jack, and when Cash was 12 years old, he watched Jack fall victim to a table saw. Johnny felt an enormous amount of guilt over the incident, and it probably had more than a little to do with his reckless adult behavior. He was the first American to intercept news about Joseph Stalin's death. Johnny Cash, in addition to an indelible contribution to music, also managed to play a role in an important moment in history. During his time with the Air Force, Cash became a crack Morse code operator. This led him to intercepting and reporting on news from the Soviet Union that Joseph Stalin had died. Cash was actually the first American to hear that the seemingly indestructible dictator had finally expired. He dug his brother's own grave. After losing he dug his brother's grave as a child, After losing his older brother Jack at 12 years old, Cash was asked to help dig his brother's grave and bury him. It's actually pretty astounding he didn't go on to invent death metal. This might have been viewed as character-building activity for young Cash, but it also undoubtedly left some serious emotional scars. Most 12-year-olds build tree forts. He almost made an entire species extinct. How many musical legends can say they nearly eradicated an entire species? Probably just Johnny Cash. Also, that's probably a good thing. In the 1960s, Cash parked his home-rigged party truck in a national forest in California where it overheated and started a massive fire that scorched hundreds of acres. Tragically, the blaze took out 49 of the area's 53 endangered California condors. Cash responded that he didn't care about your damn yellow buzzards. He was once nearly killed by an ostrich. After nearly wiping out an entire species of bird by himself, it was only natural that the birds looked for the opportunity to strike back. They got it in 1981. Johnny Cash raised ostriches on his property, and he sometimes policed their behavior with the time-honored tradition of beating them with a stick. As many know, ostriches are basically modern-day velociraptors, and one of the ostriches responded to the stick whacking by kicking Cash with his massive clawed foot. This opened up Cash's belly and nearly ended him, forcing him to hold his own insides in as he raced to the hospital. Muhammad Ali wrote him a poem. Game recognizes game. A fantastic example of this is interaction between Johnny Cash and the legendary boxer Muhammad Ali. Ali apparently wrote Cash a poem, which Cash treasured so much that he kept it locked in a fireproof safe thereafter. It eventually became to light that Ali hadn't actually written the poem, but had lifted it from another author, which is actually more impressive if you think about it. Muhammad Ali, one of the most intimidating men to ever live, lied about writing a poem just to impress Johnny Cash. He began smoking before he was a teenager. Cash began smoking at 12 and never looked back, picking up a lifelong nicotine habit. It's a wonder that it didn't ruin his voice. Life Unseen reports that smoking was one of his many bad habits. Another of these habits, apparently eating cotton balls while working in the fields. Cash was arrested 7 times. Johnny Cash is perhaps best known for his infamous concert in Folsom Prison, which cemented him as a counterculture legend. He also spent plenty of time inside prison behind the bars, too. He was arrested 7 times in his life, usually for charges related to drugs or alcohol. Several arrests for public drunkenness and reckless driving were inevitable, but the most memorable case has to be his arrest for drunkenly picking flowers from someone's yard at 2 a.m. Cash's drug use was more intense than most people realize. He might have sang country music, but he lived a rock star lifestyle. Cash started smoking young and picked up several addictions thereafter. Alcohol and amphetamines were his main vices, habits he started as a young musician, and he went to rehab several times attempting to get clean. June Carter wrote Ring of Fire about coveting Johnny Cash. Like many musical legends, Johnny Cash didn't write all of his own songs. In fact, one of his biggest hits, Ring of Fire, was written by June Carter, his future wife. Carter wrote the song about Johnny Cash, more specifically the guilt she felt over her feelings for him despite their marriages to other people. She obviously got over it, but seriously, it was an intense and torrid quagmire of passion and morality. He had exclusively rocky marriages. Johnny Cash eventually settled down with the love of his life, June Carter Cash, but even that wasn't an entirely happy story, as they broke up and reconciled several times. His first marriage to Vivian Liberto, who he met at 17, was incredibly rocky and ended in a bitter divorce that left both sides hurt. Between the two marriages, Cash had 5 children. He was best friends with Roy Orbison. These days it's lucky strike just to have a pleasant neighbor. The idea of 2 world-famous musicians happening to live next to each other is incredibly unlikely, but that was the case for Johnny Cash. He was neighbors with Roy Orbison, the singer of Pretty Woman, and a member of the Traveling Wilburys. Despite the 2 wildly different careers, Cash and Orbison got on famously and eventually even worked together on several occasions. They even performed together for Johnny Carson. Cash wrote Chicken in Black to upset record execs. One of the most amazing songs in Johnny Cash's discography, Chicken in Black, is a bit of an outlier. Though there's a good reason for it. Cash was annoyed with his record label, so he set out to make a song so terrible they wouldn't let him out of his contract, or they would let him out of his contract. He even recorded a music video for it, which featured him in a powder blue cape and yellow jumpsuit. The song was about a singer's brain being put into a chicken, because why not? Cash plan worked, and he was let out of his contract. Jimmy Carter was his cousin. Jimmy Carter, the 39th president, was a distant cousin of June Carter, and thus became related to Cash by marriage. And even though the relation was pretty distant, President Carter became close with Cash and June and maintained a lifelong friendship. One can only imagine what they all talked about. It's probably super interesting, like, peanuts and depression and stuff. He once released 500 chicks in a hotel. 500 actual chicks. For his most infamous prank, Johnny Cash released 500 baby chickens into the hotel where he was staying. Not content to dump 500 live animals in the lobby, Cash instead diligently put 100 animals on each of the hotel's 5 floors. Staff, predictably, were not amused. This was also the early stages of his career before he had the clout to really get away with such things. He survived a 12-day coma. When you live life at the speed that Johnny Cash did, you have to be pretty tough to survive. Although Cash lived to the ripe old age of 71, he almost didn't make it there at all. In 93, when he was 61, Cash was dreadfully ill. This was in part due to complications with diabetes, and he went into a 12-day coma that doctors feared he would never wake up from. Of course, Johnny Cash wasn't one just to lay around and wait to die, so he just sort of woke up and got back to recording music. He was ultimately diagnosed with autonomic neuropathy, something he would suffer through for the remaining 10 years of his life. He used a windshield wiper to clear his friend's ashes from his car. Although his songs can bring out tears in even the manliest of men, Johnny Cash wasn't exactly one for emotions. Farron Young was a lifetime friend of Cash's and a musical contemporary. When he died in 96, his son asked if he could spread Young's ashes in Johnny's garden, which he had enjoyed visiting. Nature intervened, and the remains ended up all over Johnny Cash's car's windshield. And when he returned home to find the mess, Cash unceremoniously windshield wiped his departed friend into oblivion, remarking that Young went back and forth until he was gone. Now tell me, there's no way you could have known wrong. No way. Unless you are a relative or Johnny Cash historian. Because this stuff just blew my mind. As my nephew would say, mind blown. That's all I got for you. Hope you really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed doing this one especially. I'm not the biggest Johnny Cash fan, but his life just always interested me because it was such a crazy life. And man, is it crazier than anything I ever dreamed of. Anyway, have a great day. God bless you, and everybody.